have seen 4-story residential buildings being evacuated. Got heavy.
Hello and welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to our training academy. We're here with another episode of From the Command Post. Today we're going to be talking to the command officers and some of the support folks about the 2-alarm fire that took place on Clarksburg Square Road. Before we get started, and as always, if you're a CCO and you want COPDI hour credit for this episode, make sure you log in using the Google form on the PSTA website. If you're watching from the firehouse, make sure you complete that fire app. That data that we collect in the fire app reports is important for accreditation and recording our training hours. A couple of quick announcements before we get started today. The Command Comps 2024 season is getting ready to start here next Monday as we complete the evaluator training for the 2024 season. And what that means for command officers and everybody else out there in MCFRS is that Command Lab is going to be essentially off limits until just about Thanksgiving, since we're going to be doing our testing and running command officers through the exercise. Two other things coming up. We have 2 more chief officer seminars before the end of the year. I wanted to make sure I get that out to you guys so you can pencil it into your schedule. November 2nd, we're having the NFFF come out here and do a talk. They're going to be teaching us to take care of your own class. It's going to be a really good class. They teach it nationwide. It's about line of duty deaths and how they affect the department and how we can be better about handling those type of situations. And on October 16th, we're having a company come in and talk to us about battery fires and electrical systems and how to manage that and how to be better as a department. So those are my 2 announcements. I'm now going to turn it over to our operations chief, Chief Cooper, so we can get the episode started. Thank you.
Thanks. Am I looking that way?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, I want to start by doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. I would be remiss if I didn't give out a well-deserved and well-earned shout-out to Battalion Chief Mark Davis, who, along with retired Battalion Chief Kelvin Thomas, really got this program up and running. And then when Kelvin retired, Chief Gibson took over. This program is far-reaching, and I want to give you an example of that. I stopped by the fire on Village Fountain Drive yesterday, and a really unique thing happened. A young gentleman, 17 years old, came up to me and asked me if I was the guy who was on these videos. And it kind of took me aback. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, the command post videos. I said, yeah, that's me. No. I said, yeah, that's me. I said, what do you know about him? He says, well, I'm a big fan of the fire department. Apparently he has visited a station here and there, specifically 34 more than once, and he's a big fan of us. And he watches these videos. So they're pretty far-reaching. So this is just another example of Chief Davis's, and others, but Chief Davis's, I'm shouting out to him, commitment to leaving this place better than he found it. So thank you. So that being said, we're going to move on to the program now. I'm going to make my introductions. Mr. Luke Hodgson, who is the Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. If you're not familiar what he does for us, hopefully you'll glean some of that today and ask some questions and learn more about the support he and his people provide us daily, right? Battalion Chief Brent Hopkins, Battalion 3 on the A shift. Lieutenant Tim Koehn, assigned to 31 on the C shift, and Battalion Chief Russell Blinkhorn, Battalion 2 on the B shift. Give me a chance, I can get it out. So in the spirit of moving this thing along, I'm going to let you know we're talking about the incident on Clarksburg Square Road, which happened about 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Chief Blinkhorn to get things going.
So I was working overtime. Battalion 5 on the A shift, which I shouldn't do anymore because every time I do, I end up on one of these videos. But it was about, I'd say, just after 8 o'clock in the morning. I forget what day of the week it was. But I was sitting in the office there, Battalion 5. I saw the building fire pop up for Clarksburg, so I was out the door pretty quickly. 34 at the time had moved over to 22, I think, for some EMS supplies or what have you. So it was, I want to say the truck might have been out too, but anyways, I got out the door pretty quickly. The The initial report was smoke coming from a first floor apartment. And going to Clarksburg, I kind of had in the back of my head, I knew all those places were sprinklered. So I kind of had that hint of, maybe it's going to be food on the stove. But I didn't want to downplay it, going to a building fire, so you got to expect the place to be on fire when you get there. Needless to say, there wasn't too much chatter on the radio as I was going out the door. But as I was heading north on 355, when I crested the hill there at 27, I saw this column of smoke that I haven't seen in a long time. It was just a massive, large column of smoke in the distance. And honestly, at that split second, I thought to myself, man, Frederick County is burning something down. Like, why are we not in Frederick County right now? What are they? I didn't even click to me that this was the fire I was going to, because the initial report was just smoke from a first floor apartment. And you can kind of see the column there on the screen. And I saw it. It looked.
Is that from your?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's from the Clarksburg area, but I was coming, from 34, and it looked like it was so far away and such a big fire, it didn't even immediately click to me that it was the one I was going to in Clarksburg. But about that time, Montgomery came across and said, we got a second report of a very large fire, and then I started hearing police chatter on the police radio, officers calling for more help. They needed to evacuate the building and so forth. So pretty quickly I realized that was the fire that I was going to. And with the reports quickly coming in and what I was seeing, and knowing that Clarksburg is all lightweight construction, knowing how close all the buildings are together up there, and knowing that firehouses are a little bit more spread out in the northern part of the county as opposed to when you get down further, I basically picked up the mic and I was getting ready to call for the second alarm myself going en route, but Tower 35 beat me to it.
So I want to stop you for a second.
Yep.
You were working overtime on the A shift.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already have your opportunity to look down and see who was working where, who the officers were?
Yep.
Put out your briefing and all that?
I did.
So were you going up the road, was your mindset a little different because it wasn't your shift and the people that you're comfortable working with day in and day out on the B shift? Or did that not play into it at all?
So it didn't play into effect because I had worked up there enough. I knew the officers, so I knew the players. I knew that that's a pretty good shift up there, the 5th Battalion A shift. So
because that does play a role.
yeah,
Whether we want to admit it or not, it does play a role. Our comfort with the people that we're responding
Absolutely.
with plays a role.
Yep.
And it certainly plays a role in the decision-making process, at least in my arena.
sure. So Tower 35. So I got up there pretty quick. I pulled up just a minute behind Tower 35 and the engine up there. But they pulled up on the scene and had a heavy fire from the rear. I think the initial report was heavy fire from the ground floor, and there's a picture of them pulling up there from the ground floor, running up side Charlie, and it was already up into the attic and through the roof. So that picture that they just had up there that's basically the arrival picture there, right? That's Tower 35 setting up. So I was positioned on side Alpha, right? And I did not I obviously saw the column of smoke. I did not see all this fire from side Alpha, but I did have fire coming from the eaves on side Alpha. So I knew it was in the attic, right? And what played an important role for me was falling back on the fire that I ran up there a few years ago on Millhaven, right? Millhaven was a lightning strike fire, but the building looked almost to me to be identical to this one, right? It was a 3-story apartment building. Well, Millhaven was a garden apartment, right? But I couldn't really see the front door, just like in this case in Clarksburg, where I was positioned on the Alpha Bravo corner. I couldn't see, I could see where the front door was, but I couldn't see if it was a stairwell, if it was a lobby enclosed. I just didn't know, right? So I wasn't quite sure what type of building I was dealing with. Kind of the same with Millhaven there. But the lessons that I learned in Millhaven was I had originally thought that the dormers on top of the building were decorative. Come to find out, they were the second floor loft of the 3rd floor apartments. So back in Millhaven, right, that's where something I walked away with. There was a lot of confusion on my end that companies were telling me they were on the second floor. I thought they were on the second floor of the building, where in fact they were on the second floor of the third floor apartment. And on Millhaven, basically, if you're in that second floor area of the third floor apartment, you're surrounded by attic space. So these guys were up there surrounded by fire. They couldn't really. It was kind of like if you think about like a massive knee wall type of situation, right? You're just surrounded by fire. You don't necessarily see it, but you feel it. And in that case, I didn't evacuate soon enough, and I sent somebody to the burn center. So here I am, sitting in front of what feels like the same type of fire, right? And there's some more video from it, because there are dormers in this building. And when I pulled up on the scene, I again saw the fire coming.
Can you pause that?
Had fire coming from the eaves on side Alpha. And I had, again, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the initial report was fire on the first floor. I got crews on side Charlie telling me they have fire on the bottom level working its way all the way up. And then I had very quickly found out, or I wanted to know where engine 735 was operating, and they were on the third floor. So I'm thinking, okay, I got a crews up on the third floor. I got heavy fire going through the attic. And so I'm kind of starting to process this, right? I'm starting to feel red flags coming across. I got heavy fire on side Charlie. I got fire in the attic. I got possibly crews operating above a fire because I don't know if there's still an apartment on fire somewhere on the first floor.
Right.
And falling back on Millhaven, I got crews on the third floor, and I know that if they're in that apartment, they're probably surrounded by fire and just don't know it, because they did report heavy smoke in the hallway up there. So it wasn't far after I pulled up on the scene and took command that I requested the evacuation of that building.
Okay.
Because, again, and I want to throw out there, I had crews on side Charlie, some pretty good officers telling me that they wanted to start master stream operations. So I got officers telling me they need master streams on side Charlie. I also have a crew on side Alpha tell me they're ready for master streams. I got crews inside, and I didn't want to do both.
What kind of
Right.
feedback were you getting from the crews inside? What were they?
So again, it was really before I announced the evacuation, it was just paramedic engine 735 and truck 734 were the only two crews that had made it inside the building. Everybody else on side Charlie was setting up for master streams. The entrance door to side Charlie was what was involved in fire, so they couldn't really make entry unless they went around to the ends of the building. So they were trying to enter some of the apartments via ladders on side Charlie, because that was my direction, is start evacuation and try to do that from exterior entrances. So again, you can see this is pretty much arrival, and you can see them knocking down the fire on the bottom level there. And that bottom, where that firefighter is directing that stream was the entrance to that building from the lower level.
On the Charlie side.
On the Charlie side, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I evacuated the building. I accounted for the two crews that came out, and then we started master stream operations. And very, very quickly, the fire, I don't want to say it went out, but it darkened down pretty quickly. So it was pretty effective use of the master streams.
So from the time you declared the evacuation to the time that you were able to account for each member that was inside, how long was that?
It was just a couple minutes.
Pretty easy.
Yeah, again, it was just two crews. So, yeah, it was just me trying to figure out, again, confirming that only two crews had entered the building. And I did that through, I want to say, 35's officer. I said, was anybody else in there? And I think the answer was no.
So there were no issues with radio then, meaning availability of getting on the radio?
I think I had to call one of the units a couple times, right? But there was a lot going on. That's one of the things we walked away from, which I put in the after-action report, was there was just, in my opinion, there was just too much radio chatter, right? There was so much talk about water supply and hydrants and that stuff. And as an incident commander, when you have a building like this on fire, you haven't accounted for all the residents. You got crews in there at the same time the crews want to start master stream operations, several red flags. Like, you know, I'm not necessarily worried about water supply problems unless you don't have water, right? I want to know if you don't have water, and that's going to play into a red flag for me where, okay, you know, maybe I need to pull people out faster than I did. But in my after action, I asked officers and drivers, hey, work amongst yourselves face to face. Only bring significant water supply issues, i.e. you're out of water or can't get water, to my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that took up a lot of radio time. And most of it just was kind of noise to me because I was so focused on other stuff. I just let them talk without, and going hindsight, I probably should have just said radio silence at the time.
Yeah. So you mentioned it was very soon after arrival. There were more than a few red flags, which led you to make the decision you made. Well, let's talk about the red flags. I think that's important to highlight those as well.
Yeah, so if I can hit them all, right, there was firefighters operating above an uncontrolled fire, in my opinion, because again, initial report, fire in a first floor, smoke coming from a first floor apartment. The crews on side Charlie reported fire on the bottom level, right? So that worked its way up the exterior into the attic, and it was through the roof. So I just didn't see it, right? Because I was on side Alpha, this is on side Charlie. So I wasn't sure if that was an outside-in fire, or did this fire start in a first floor apartment, work its way out, and then up, right? Did I still have an apartment on fire somewhere in the lower level?
Yeah.
And to clarify, from the front, it was 3 stories. From the rear, it was 4 stories because the bottom level was parking garages.
Okay.
When I say parking garage, I mean just individual unit had their own, like, garages.
Yeah.
Right? So you had crews operating above the uncontrolled fire. You had fire in the attic. There were some water supply issues, but nobody ran out of water. What were some of the other ones?
How about one that we don't speak about a lot, but your gut?
Yeah, so people have been asking me about this fire, and I've been talking about the importance of repetition, right? Some of us don't get that, and I fell back on, like I had already mentioned, on Millhaven because it felt like the same type of fire. So a lot of what I learned in Millhaven, I brought to the table here. The difference was Millhaven was a garden apartment building. This was an apartment building, and that didn't register to me in this event, right? Because I couldn't see. I couldn't see what happened inside the front door, right? In the end, it was a lobby, right? It was an elevator lobby. Where in Millhaven, it was an open stairwell, and you had 4 apartments off each landing. That's what it felt like to me here. It ended up being a much bigger building. This was an apartment building with hallways. Had I have known that, I probably would have gotten some more information to do a little bit more better situational awareness, because I, again, in hindsight, would have liked to kept crews in there a little bit longer to have finished the search. My plan was, when I evacuated, to quickly knock down the fire and at some point, as fast as I could, transition back to the interior for at least a search, right? But I was, again, thinking lightweight construction. Fire was throughout the attic and through the roof. But it was in the back of my mind that I wanted to get crews back in there to finish the search. The exterior operation took a little bit longer than I had anticipated. I don't know if we're moving ahead of your questions, but
No, keep going.
at one point, a civilian from the first floor self-evacuated while we were doing the exterior operation, right? And that was a tough thing for the gut, right? It's not something you want to see or hear as an incident commander after you pulled everybody out of the building. But about that same time, Chief Hopkins had come to me with a list of apartments that we had not accounted for, and I think that was through Luke as well. But the police had, while we were doing all this, the police did a really good job of getting a list of residents from the Homeowners Association president for the building who was on the scene. And they were very quickly calling people, accounting for people that were on the scene. So pretty quickly, we had a list of apartments. I think there were just 4 apartments on the first floor that we had not accounted for the residents. So about the same time that this resident from one of those apartments came out, we said, okay, well, that resident was from apartment, whatever it was, 103. So we quickly, I said, okay, now's a good time to get crews in there and finish the search of the other 3 apartments, which were vacant. So
And who initiated the police doing the work they did?
Police did.
I think they did it themselves, yeah.
They had pulled people out themselves. I mean, that was a concern when I first got there, was, are the police accounted for? They came up to me and handed me a list of what apartments they had gotten out, what people, it was just a handwritten on a piece of paper type thing. It wasn't what we'd gotten in the end. And they were actually inside the building pulling people out or telling people to get out. And so I conferred with them and made sure that their officers were all out, and then we had only those 3 apartments that were unaccounted for. So
And when did you get there? At what point of the operation did you get there?
after he'd already evacuated everybody, I wheeled my way into side Charlie with my car, and noticed that where I was parked, or was going to park, was a great spot for a ladder truck to get back in there. So I backed myself all the way out, set myself outside so I could say, go to my car, turn, and you're going to be at the back of the building. And then was able to do a 360 and walk up to Chief Blinkhorn at that point. So it's a little longer than expected because of where I was parked and where I needed to get the car out of the way.
And then you got in.
Then I got in and started managing the stuff he needed to manage.
So I think it's probably time to segue into that, right? More than once you've let me know how well that this entire team worked together and how helpful that was. So you evacuated, you went defensive ops, took a little bit longer than anticipated. Once that ended, you were coming up with your next step in the plan. At that point, is Chief Hopkins in the car with you?
Yeah, so Chief Hopkins got in. He did a really good job of basically, he took the chart, I think flipped it over and drew a diagram of the building for me and where the units currently were, and gave me a good idea of what was going on side Charlie. So that was helpful. And we were talking about going back in there and finishing the search and what units hadn't been accounted for. So we did that, and once crews did that and came back out, I said there's really no reason at this point to transition back to an interior attack, right? Because there was so much fire up through the roof and running through the attic, and we had already put so much water into this building that I was a little bit concerned about the structural integrity of just the weight of some of the roof trusses and stuff coming down on people. So I just at that point said we're just going to keep this as a exterior operation, and that's what we did. So at that point it was a matter of, and Chief Demetriadis was there as the duty chief, and he was also working with the police, who, by the way, I want to plug them because they brought their drone. I don't know if you want to talk about that separately, but the police brought their drone and drone operator to the command post and actually gave us a laptop, right?
Well,
that we
didn't get, no.
whose laptop was that?
That was your iPad.
Oh, the iPad.
They gave you a link.
So
Okay.
Doug Hinkle sent me and
Yep.
it's something I wanted to say, that Doug Hinkle sent me a link to my phone. It was the hardest time for getting from my phone to the I could use my phone the whole time, but I wanted it on the iPad so we could set it up and see it.
Yep.
I actually had to write in the whole address in a web browser. So it was all those letters and numbers with dots all on there because I couldn't get my phone to connect to the iPad to send it real quick to say here it was.
Gotcha. Okay.
We
So it was
set
the
your
iPad.
Yeah, we set your iPad up, which worked well. Just we didn't have a place to put it. It kind of just fell
Yeah.
all over the place most of the time. But it was the iPad.
Okay, my mistake.
So-
I knew it was an extra screen in front of me, but the police were there and were able to actually take their drone, turn on their infrared camera, and you can see the hot spots in the building. So that was pretty cool. That was neat.
Besides being neat, right? How helpful was that to you?
It was helpful. Yeah, it was definitely because
help you drive
throughout the instant, we could see where which aerial we needed to call and say, hey, you've got a hot spot under the Alpha Delta corner or whatever.
So that's something we should encourage the police to continue to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
They just did it
Good to
amongst
hear that.
themselves. I didn't request it.
Yep.
They just showed up with it.
So we have an ongoing relationship with them on that, and this kind of feedback really helps. So
Yeah, it was
glad you brought it up.
spectacular use because then we
Good.
could really see what was going on. You could actually see the puddle. You could see the lake of water that was on the third floor, fourth floor at one point going, that's all water right there.
Good.
We were filling the building up. So it was really helpful. And they were able to move it around, do what we wanted to do, up, down, left, right,
Yeah,
thermal,
so-
not thermal.
And on the side, let's work on a better way for the iPad to sit so you can use it and not having to flop over, and it's another tool, right?
Yeah.
We can do that another day.
And that's another thing that we have to we need to talk with the IT people is figuring out a way to get our phones connected to it so we can just send it quickly as opposed to, it was a pretty long address that I had to go in there.
Yep.
and figure-
Those are easy
Yeah.
obstacles to overcome.
Yeah.
It's just we don't know what we don't know
Yeah.
as we're
It's the first time I had to do that.
learning this new tool, right? So
Yep.
we'll refine that
Yeah.
process. Sorry to interrupt. So you decided to remain defensive. drones up, helping you determine, what your next steps are going to be. What else is going on in the meantime? Chief Dimitriadis is there working with the police on civilian accountability, right?
Yeah, so he's just throwing me little tidbits like, hey, I've got emergency management involved. They're en route.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question.
Yep. So, so I knew I had that big piece, right? I have all these residents that are either on the scene or that are showing up that aren't going to be able to get into this building. Definitely aren't going to be able to stay there. And we had, I'll let Tim's probably a good one to talk to this because he was the EMS 705, right? So he was assigned as kind of the liaison for the residents, and he had corralled them all to the was it like a community center?
Yeah.
Community center, which was just a couple doors up the road. So he was managing that and being a really good liaison in the meantime until emergency management showed up. But that was a big piece of what we normally do as incident commanders is have to deal with all these people that was taken off of my plate due to the fact that I had signed EMS 705 as the initial liaison, and then emergency management showed up, and it was a pretty seamless transition as far as I know. And then it was even a bigger campaign where Chief Hopkins comes in to get all these people not into their apartments, but to get a list of items, whether it be medications, clothing, wallets, all that stuff that they need to move on to the hotel where they're staying for the night. And we had how many units we had to deal with? Like,
3 floors, 8 per unit, 24.
yeah, 24 units that we had to get lists. We had to find the residents of each unit, get a list of their items that they needed for the night, and then bring them to the scene and actually assign a crew. We had to rotate crews through, and I'll let them speak to that, into the units to get their stuff out. And then we had pets we had to deal with too, both alive and deceased. So that was a big campaign that I will let them speak to, but at that point I was just focused on continuing to extinguish the fire. And another big piece of this was FEI had quickly determined that this was most likely going to be an event that they needed to investigate, right? So I had to kind of coordinate that because the area that they wanted to do all their digging was a major collapse concern for us because of the structural and integrity of where this fire ran up. So we had coordinated, or actually requested the technical rescue team out of 31. One of the units was there, but we had requested them back to kind of do a assessment of the building, if you will, and say, hey, can we let FEI get in here and start digging without having to do any shore up, because there was a lot of Boeing stuff, right? And there was a lot of water still sitting on multiple floors. So there was that aspect as well. So it was a pretty long, drawn-out event, not just because of the fire, but because of all the people that we needed to relocate, and then the long, drawn-out FEI event, which also happened during a thunderstorm. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. All right, so I think what I want to do next is I want to ask a couple real quick questions, and Luke, I want to focus on you and our process on how we initiate you, why we should initiate you, and what you bring to the table. But before we go there, quick question. So the three of you and Chief Dimitriadis, were you interwoven working together?
Yeah.
Yeah? Were you able to develop a plan, or were you all kind of doing what you thought was best at the moment? Because it sounds to me, again, I wasn't involved. It sounds to me like you guys had a plan and you executed it. From the outside looking in, that's what it sounds like to me. And if that's not the case, that's okay.
I think it started off as whatever we were given, we just started moving towards, and then at the end we had that plan going. So when we finally got them all corralled and emergency management was there and they were all kind of in one spot, I don't know what happened up there, but then we were ready to bring down. We went by floors. It was like, hey, the first floor, send all people from the first floor down, one representative from each household. We're going to send a unit in with a list to go get what they need, along with searching for deceased or alive animals. So it was luckily it was all just cats. There were no dogs in the corral, which can be a little harder. And so we had a crew that was taking care of the animal need, and then 2 or 3 crews that would go through and grab what they thought was their essentials. And so it was easy to say, Lieutenant, I need this now. And he would send those people down to me, and we'd work through that. But that's the plan we came up with as we talked. It was like one at a time, one person, have a list, here we go.
And when you separated from we'll call it the suppression branch, or when you separated from Chief Blinkhorn and left the vehicle, did you tell him you were doing that? Did you guys converse first?
Yeah, I told him I would take over, just taking care of all the people, because it was winding down, right? It was easy at that particular point. We were staying outside. It was, hey, he's got this whole managed. The fire was essentially out. The FEI was starting to ramp up. He needed to focus on that. And I said, I'll just take care of everybody to make sure that they get what they need so we can send them on their way, knowing that they were not getting back in their apartments anytime soon.
Hey, I have a question that is a good tie-in.
Sure.
From the chat here, that ties into what you were just talking about. So from the chat, looking at a large expanding incident such as this, when the shift chief arrives on scene, what are some thoughts about that person assuming command and leaving the BC to run ops, separating the responsibilities?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So the battalion chiefs are the incident commanders in our system until an event escalates to the point where either the duty chief, division chief, the fire chief have to take over. And at that point, they're the incident commander. The battalion chiefs are still running operations. So, the assistant chiefs and division chiefs are going to execute on a more global level and work with other agencies throughout the county and help execute the overall plan. But as far as the execution of the strategies, the execution of the tactics, it's the battalion chiefs. That's your job. That's not my job, right? So I want to be clear about that. The battalion chiefs are the operations. They manage the operations. Period.
Cool.
So, all right. So wasn't expecting that, so you caught me, right? So Luke, why don't we take this time for you to delve into our process, which has been working very well for the last few years, and just take the microphone.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So thank you for having me today, and thank you for the ongoing partnership that we've built and we continue to build. And these conversations are very important, not only amongst ourselves, but also everyone who's talking and understanding, where we can play a role and where they can leverage us. So for those who are not familiar, we're the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security here in Montgomery County. It's a relatively small office. It's about 25 people who work there. Forget about the Homeland Security side. That's something else we do. But the emergency management side certainly plays a role here. And emergency management, when you get down to it, we're kind of the conductor of an orchestra. And you think about all the different players that are involved in this band and this orchestra, and everyone has their expertise. The chief plays the violin, you play the drums, you play, the cello. You all bring expertise, and we leverage that expertise, but it's our role to harness it, to understand what you can and can't do, and where you need extra help, and then to call in those resources not only from the county government, but also the state, the federal government, and then our plethora of community organizations that are available to us. So we see a fire like this that's, a multi-family dwelling that expands beyond your townhouse. And we start thinking about what's the next phase. So you guys are focused on the fire, as you guys should be, but that's quickly, as you're talking about, that darkens down, and now this becomes a recovery operation. And recovery in this sense, I mean getting these folks back to some sense of normality, which it could be getting them back in their unit, could be getting them into a new unit, whatever it might be. Now the people are our priority. So the fire's out, or the fire's still working, and we're still working on that, but now we have all these people that you guys are noticing on the scene. You had the foresight very, very early to get Lieutenant Koehn involved in this, and then the battalion chief shortly thereafter, that this went much, much better than a lot of these go, because oftentimes we're not thought of until ECC is prompting you for how many people do you need for the Red Cross? How many people are going to be displaced? And then you start thinking, oh, I'm above that threshold, which, by the way, is an arbitrary threshold. So it's not always clear. I can't give you a clear definition of when you should call us, when you shouldn't. But you start thinking, okay, this is plenty more units than Red Cross can handle. That's when I'm going to engage the Office of Emergency Management. It's not too late, obviously. We're going to come whenever you guys need us. But the earlier we get there, the more we can take that person burden off of you guys. So you guys have your bailiwick that you guys need to concentrate on. We understand that it's not recovery, it's not rehousing these folks. We have folks elsewhere in the government and in the community that are there to do that. So our aim is to get in there as early as possible to help get that burden off of you guys and start shifting these people towards recovery, because the longer they stay there, I mean, there is like a psychological trauma side of it, but there's also just the pragmatic side of it, that as they stay longer and longer, they become more and more of a hindrance to you, to FEI, to whoever may be there who actually needs to get work done. So in this case, Chief Demetriadis notified ECC. That is to your point about the process. The process is whoever the incident commander or the doc is that day that deems it appropriate, they contact ECC. ECC calls whoever our duty officer is at the time. I happen to be the duty officer that morning. So ECC called me. I got back in touch with Chief Demetriadis. He gave me a brief on what was going on. I live in Laytonsville, so it wasn't a long commute, headed up there, and to my pleasant surprise, everything was in great hands when I got there. We didn't have people that were all over the scene, that were milling about.
So Luke, here's one of those times I'm going to interrupt you.
Go for it.
I told you. So, and it's all part of process, right? So you get the phone call, you decide, okay, I'm based on what Chief Demetriadis tells me, I'm going. Do you bring anybody? Do you notify anybody? Do you activate a team?
Okay, so on our side, yes. So what we're doing is we have an initial spin up for any one of these incidents, and that's the duty officer does an initial intake basically with the doc or the battalion chief that's on the scene. We kind of judge based on what the needs are, what sort of personnel are we going to need. So we then send out basically a page that goes out through text to all of our emergency management specialists. Their roster they click on if they are in fact available. The system then notifies them who's actually going to this event, and we decide what that level is. So in this event, we had 3 people going from the get-go, knowing that we might need to escalate it depending on how this shook out. So that's going on. We're also notifying all of our partners. So, you know, we can come and we can orchestrate, but there's not much of an orchestra if you only got fire and rescue there. So, you know, we're talking to the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, who does the condemnation of the individual units. We're talking to the Department of Permitting Services, who does the condemnation and the evaluation of the overall structure. Most importantly, we're talking to Health and Human Services and their mass care team, because they're the ones who are identifying what's the next step for these folks. So they're determining their shelter for that evening, but they're also they're doing intake on these folks. So they're starting case management that they're going to see them through all the way through recovery. So when I say all the way through recovery, that can be weeks, months, that can be years for some of these folks. But that's how strong our Health and Human Services folks are. And their mass care team that's completely what they're tuned into doing. So they're also moving at this time. So we're just figuring out what other agencies do you guys need involved that will help you achieve your mission, and then what will help us bring the whole of the community together to make sure these people get a warm handoff, they're taken care of. What started as a really bad day turns into something at least manageable by the end of the day. They have some place to go, they're warm, they have a roof over their head, they're comfortable, they're fed. These are the people that we're bringing together to make sure that happens.
And I asked that question because, you know, we've taken this process for granted for an awful long time. And we're now, again, within the last few years, we're kind of delving into it and really realize what you can do for us. You're the conductor of the orchestra.
Yeah, and you know, we're not there to step on your toes, to get in your way.
You're there to relieve us.
Exactly. I want everyone to understand that we're supposed to be a relief and a resource for you.
Yep.
So we may have questions for you, we want some guidance from you, but otherwise we try to stay out of your way and just be whatever help we can be. Now, part of that orchestra is you guys. So in this case, you know, it was a little bit different because of the IDLH we had that kind of continued in that building. We were worried about the structural integrity. We didn't do what we normally do, which is we escort folks back to their apartments or their condos, wherever they may be, to get those critical belongings. In this case, in consult with you two and Chief Demetriadis, we decided that's not an option in this case. So we're going to retain some crews, and you guys were super helpful with that. That while I was working with Lieutenant Koehn up at the clubhouse with each resident, so all the 24 units, we met with each one of them, and we prompted them on what is actually something critical that you need. Because some people need that prompting. You know, you're not going to take your whole closet. You're going to need 2 or 3 days worth of clothes. You need your keys, you need your medicine, you need some money. These are the things we prompt them to think through. Then tell me where exactly it is as you remember it. And then, as you said, we've developed that whole list, that manifest, that we can then bring down to you guys, and you guys walked in and actually did the retrieval, which was a huge benefit. I mean, if you think about what we're trying to encourage people to do during these emergencies, it's not grab anything, it's get out of there. So the last thing we want to do is say, you did exactly what we told you to do, but now you can't get to your car, your medicines, good luck getting those, it's a weekend, good luck talking to your doctor. We try to take care of all of that, and you guys have always been great partners with that to make sure people are repatriated with what they need so that we can move them on to their next step of recovery.
Okay, so you got there, you reported directly to the clubhouse area?
Yep, so I first saw, actually I think Chief Dimitriadis intercepted me as I was walking up the street. Just by fortune, he happened to see me. So he said, look, we got Lieutenant Koehn here. He did an excellent job getting them to the clubhouse. So they're already all, gathered in one spot. You can start there. Go up there, meet up with Lieutenant Koehn, and again, to my pleasant surprise, the community was also very well prepared. So you have to understand that when we go into these, and you guys know this with all sorts of different conditions, it really depends on what kind of community you're in. So in this case, we were in a condo community, not an apartment community. In an apartment community, we oftentimes rely on property management to give us a rental list of folks who are there. That's usually the name of whoever's on the rent, who's ever on the lease. It doesn't necessarily say who's in the actual units, and it doesn't really have a good contact information. In this case, since they were condos, they have a very active homeowner association. So that group, as you know, you engaged them very early.
Yeah.
They were ready to work, and they supplied us with every bit of information we needed from the get-go. So when I walked up to the lieutenant, he already had the entire manifest of people, how many people were in each apartment. He was already working on a census for pets, because we always like to go through and do that sweep before we let anyone go down to the scene. So a lot of things worked in our favor that day. The proximity of the clubhouse, the weather that day, the active homeowners association, your foresight in designating people early on to the people aspect of this made a huge difference in their experience, and how this could have gone much worse. Like I said, it went a little bit better for them.
So to try and articulate how big of an operation that part of the overall operation was, Tim, from the time that Chief Blinkhorn assigned that to you to the time that OEMHS felt pretty comfortable that the warm pass-off had been done, how much time had transpired?
I'd say probably about maybe 30 minutes max.
Oh, okay.
Once he assigned that to me, I had already kind of completed like a 360, started rounding people up. Very early on, went up to the clubhouse, just happened to find the HOA president, happened to find the manager, and they gave us access to the community building. And just in the general discussion, I actually met one of the police officers as I was going up, and she was able to provide that information to the command post of who she had found so far. And once I got up to that community building, I was able to touch base with them, and they gave us, I asked for several printouts of all the residents, and then started just going into the community building and saying, hey, who's in unit 304? Who's in unit 101? Like, are you up here? And making sure that everybody in that apartment was done. So by the time that Luke actually showed up, we were actually able to kind of step away from everybody, come up with a game plan. He was able to kind of express like, hey, listen, this is where we're at. This is where we're going to be in 6 hours. So we kind of came up with that game plan very early on, and with the coordination of the HOA president and that information we were able to get, we were very quickly able to determine the exact number of people total and in that building, as well as each individual unit. And I think I actually walked down a list and was able to provide command with saying, here's the exact number, and I can tell you that the only unit that we have not made contact with is unit 102.
And what was that exact number?
43.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people to deal with and service, right? Did you do all that by yourself, or did you have...
I mean, it was the nice thing is once we corralled everybody, it was very easy just to go straight through this list and touch base with everybody. There were a couple people that we actually had to call on the phone who were like either they were already at their jobs that morning. One of the residents that was actually on the third floor that had 2 pets, she was gone. We were able to reach out to her because she was one of the units that we couldn't get a hold of, and she just happened to pop up on scene, and very quickly we could establish like, yep, okay, we have this resident. You know, we don't need a search in this one because we have confirmed everybody is out.
So all the while this is going on, that and I hate to use the word burden, that tremendous task has been passed off to them. What's going on in the command post? What's going on in the building?
So we had finished the search, and again, I had very little interaction with the residents, right? So we were continuing to kind of get tower ladders and ladder pipes set up where we needed to be set up to hit the remaining hot spots that were still burning up in the attic. Still concerned about the structural integrity. So one thing, I'm starting to, as they're managing this, part of the, I don't want to say problem, but part of the thing that didn't click was how many personnel I would have needed to go in here and grab all of these items for all these people, right? So it was a hot day that day, and I was starting to release units because there were a lot of units at that point that were, tired and on the second alarm that just weren't being used. So I started releasing some units. Still waiting and working with FEI to do their thing. So once we started getting into the talks of getting personnel into the building to retrieve these items, we started measuring for the gases. Is still an ideal H in there? And the answer was yes. So it hasn't been mentioned, but all these crews that were rotating through this building to get these items out of each apartment were on SCBA, right? So they were coming out and they were getting tired, and I had to start not only, so I had already relieved crews for fire suppression, right? Now I'm having to relieve crews for this task, and I didn't have enough people. So for the instant commanders that are watching this, right, one of the things I learned was don't be so quick to release units, because I had to call, I think, at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 units back to the scene. They were different units, but I had to call units back to the scene to assist in this campaign of retrieving items, right? Yeah, so it was a lot of just managing personnel, right, making sure everybody was staying hydrated. We did have some minor injuries, so I had to transport some people to some fire personnel. I think we transported 2 civilians, right? So it was managing that aspect as well. Yeah, and then it was just a matter of working on as we do on any fire, working the hot spots, working with FEI. They were very meticulous and pulling stuff out. So that was a prolonged operation.
So Tim, anything you'd like to? I'm going to go around again. Anything you feel you may have left out that's important to pass on?
I think like the really quick coordination of us integrating into OEM and getting things lined up 4 or 5 steps down the road, like knowing like, hey, listen, once this goes out, touching base and giving the residents an idea of, hey, this is where we're at. At I think 9 o'clock, we basically had a like an initial meeting with the residents where it was myself, Luke, and then Chris Burt from HHS. We all 3 of us together kind of went and gave them an announcement saying like, hey, this is where we're at. This is what's going to happen. These are our goals, and if you just bear with us, we will get you from point A, from like the response all the way to recovery, like Luke said, and gave them an idea of what a couple of those steps were going to be, and very early on, knowing that step 6 down the road, which the chief had already kind of passed on to me, was like get a list of the essentials, what units they're in, and the 1 representative. So when he asked for it at the end of, closer to the end of the event, we were able just to, like, it was a stack of papers. I just handed it to him, and then he assigned, Engine 703 Bravo's officer, this is, Captain such and such. This is Miss Hardy. You 2 are a married pair. You guys will work together on making sure you get what you need for the next couple days. So it was I think very, very seamless with making sure that these residents were kept in the loop of what was happening. And arbitrarily at 9 o'clock, we said that we were going to get residents, like sending our units in at around 3 o'clock to have them get all their belongings, and at 2:50, every single unit was taken care of. So
You said a really important word, seamless, right? And for an operation like that to go seamless, that's a really big deal, because that doesn't happen often. So
Right.
kudos to the four of you.
right.
Brent, you got anything you'd like to add?
So I do have a couple things, a couple hiccups there, where a couple of the units were wanting more, and it was hard to reel them back because they just lost everything. They wanted more stuff. Hey,
Oh,
this
the
is
people.
essential. The people
Gotcha.
wanted more.
Right.
And so some of those,
Yeah.
hey, I have to be at work tomorrow, and that's my uniform. I need that too. So there were some that were extended because they kept on pushing us, and we didn't push back. Okay, we'll keep on working with you. Keeping them away from the building was difficult too, especially the first floor people that
Yeah.
pointed things. There was one person the person had died, and their family showed up, and they wanted things out of the apartment. But how do we prove who they were? They're just going in the apartment getting stuff. So we had, do you have a license? Can we marry that up with the person's name so we can at least, because I don't want to make this any more traumatic than it is. So we went in there. The last thing was weapons, right? We had people that wanted
Yeah.
guns. Luckily, FBI was there, so we could put them in an SCBA. They could go secure the guns, ensure the gun is legal and it's theirs. But, I didn't think of that until someone starts asking for handguns. So it's like, wait, what do we do with this? So that would have been, if they weren't there, we would have had a special call FBI to come in, because the cops can't wear SCBA, so we have to bring our guys in to go do that. So it's still important to have us in there. We just had a little fire at the Promenade a couple shifts ago. It's much bigger, right? It's a huge building. But corralling those people was difficult. Finding the woman's apartment that was on fire was difficult. In the end, you're yelling at people. If you go to the front, they're going to tell you what to do, because people just were everywhere in that building there. So it is essential to get that liaison going. At least somebody walk around going, walk to this location. We'll give you information as we get it. In fact, the resident that the apartment fire happened, we lost her 3 times. She just walked away from us, and we couldn't keep her in that area to ask her more questions, for FBI to get there to ask her questions. So those are the hardest parts about that, was just a weapon. What do you mean? You have 3 guns, and you need to get those guns because you don't want to leave them in the apartment, and I don't think they should be left there. And then, when someone dies and they want to get to that stuff, how do we prove it's them? So other than that, I think Chief Blinkhorn did a spectacular job. Calm all the time on the radio, never really got out of the mold. When we first got in the car, there was a lot of chaos, but that's the good chaos. Like, I don't know where every unit is right now. We need to figure this out. We worked really well together, gave him the chart. Where's this unit? Where's that unit? What are you doing with them? And getting that chart figured out, showing him the diagram and saying, hey, this is what you got going on, I think calmed everything down. And once we got past that point, like, all right, we know where everybody is now. We know everybody's out. We know they're all safe. The cops are safe. The people are mostly out, except for the people that walk out on us late. But once you get that chaos, the chaos corralled, I say, because it's never fully finished until we're done, it worked really well. And it's not something, I don't work with Chief Blinkhorn every day. We're on 2 different shifts, so that proves well for everything that we do, that we can turn around and do that.
So how'd that play into it, right? As a battalion chief, I always ran mostly with the same 2 battalion chiefs all the time. I asked Chief Blinkhorn a question: what kind of impact did it have on the fact those weren't your people, right? How about the partnership here? Anything different because you don't normally run together all the time, or seamless?
I'm just going to use the word seamless, right?
Good.
And I think he pointed out the fact that we come up here and do command comps in the lab and training on what the job of the second chief officer is, and you even have the cards now. He hopped right in and I think did what we expect any second arriving chief officer to do, was show me what he had on side Charlie. Like he said, he drew a little diagram for me and he started charting for me so I could just focus on actually seeing the building, which isn't something that you have the luxury of doing on every fire, right? I couldn't see the whole building, but I could see enough where I knew what was going on from at least through the attic space. Again, we can talk about building dynamics. The building that I was parked in front of was actually a garden apartment. It was a little bit smaller, but it was a garden apartment. And then the building next, the one was on fire, was an apartment building. Could I go back and ask a little bit more questions and it was in my after-action report to get that feedback of, one of the questions I will ask from now on is how many units do you have per floor? Right? That might be a cue to me. Hey, this is not a garden apartment. This is an apartment building because how many per floor were there? 8?
8.
8 per floor.
Yeah.
That's not something you generally have in a garden apartment.
Luke?
So for me, I think everything went very, very well. But I think some lessons learned, not only in this, but other events. You guys are focused on protecting life and property, and that's great. Part of that protecting property goes beyond extinguishing the fire. Something I try to encourage everyone to think about at the incident command level is think about those sprinklers very early. Think about controlling those sprinklers, because what we have the most displacement because of, as you guys know, is water damage. And that's an incipient damage that really, really disrupts folks. So we quickly get up to astronomical numbers of people displaced in these multifamily dwellings when we're talking about water, but it's also displacing them for a very long time as they recover. And it also comes down to, when we're going down, in this case, we had the homeowner association. In some places, we have the management company there with us. Rather than popping doors when we're looking for extension or we're doing a secondary search, if they're there with the keys and there's some time on your side, we encourage you guys to do that, because the minute that door is popped, we have to displace those folks. There's no way that we can secure that door until maintenance can get in there and get that done. So, of course, that wasn't applicable here, but I always use these multifamily dwelling fires to think about some of the things that we do see that pervade when people are trying to move through recovery. Again, assigning someone as liaison worked very, very well. That was all set up, and I know it got chaotic for you with people coming down. I think you would agree that's far less chaotic than, say, the promenade.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you had somebody who had information, and this is one of the tricks. I mean, you bring people into some place, and they know the only place I'm going to get information in these updates is in the clubhouse. That's how we keep them in the clubhouse.
Right.
The only way I'm going to get back my stuff is if I give this guy my list of stuff, and the only place he is in the clubhouse. So I can't walk down there and get my stuff. There's always challenges, like you said,
Yeah.
that we deal with firearms,
used to it.
people wanting more and more. Yep, and we just work through it. And I think what really worked, which was, I think, unique from our perspective, was that there was this division of labor between the 2 battalion chiefs on this incident. So eventually it got to, as the chiefs described, that Chief Blinkhorn was working really on the strategy and tactics of the fire extinguishment side of this. And Chief Hopkins broke off and was handling the people side of it. When Chief Hopkins broke off and handled the people side of it, he didn't divorce himself from Chief Blinkhorn. So that kept Lieutenant Koehn and I connected, that when we were saying, we want to get these people back in, well, you're checking first with Chief Blinkhorn, you're telling me these are the impediments, this is how we're going to structure this. And that went into our plan and how we were going to do things. Yeah. So I think that the open communications that we maintain with the command staff worked very, very well all the way around.
Awesome. And, hey, I don't think I did a good job answering that first question. I made an assumption that everyone out there watching understands the expectations of, certainly of me, the fire chief, the division chiefs. The duty chief, when the duty chief shows up on the scene of an event, it's totally in a support role, right? The duty chief's main responsibility is to manage the county. The duty chief is responsible for the county, and when the duty chief does engage, then what you may or may not know is that duty chief makes notification, and somebody else, whether that's Matt Kerrigan or me or another assistant chief or division chief, they slide into the duty chief role. The duty chief never abandons the duty chief role to be the incident commander. So, you see me a lot lately in these calls. You see other chiefs show up. We're there strictly in support, right? We're not taking command of an incident unless the incident says we have to. And that doesn't happen very often. So I hope that better clarifies what I said earlier. And I'm more than happy to talk about that anytime somebody wants to. Any other questions from anyone else? Please.
I know one thing that was touched upon a little bit by Luke was the mitigation of water. So I know that talking with the crews kind of after the fact and talking with Chief Blinkhorn, I know that the fire department connections were exactly where that fire originated at, and the water shutoff for that was the wall right behind that. So we had a tough time shutting the water off because of the fact that there was so much damage to that area. We didn't even identify that, or we couldn't identify that that's where the water shutoff was. And so we actually had to have, WSSC had to come in and shut the water off.
That's a big deal.
For the whole area, because the water was just free flowing for, I think, an hour.
Hours.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like there was, like that was a big thing that I know that there was a lot of communication on that of saying like, we need to control the water. We need to control the water. Okay, the fire is knocked. You know, how do we shut the water off? And we actually had the maintenance, somebody that was on the board for that building actually was able to tell us where the water shutoff was. But by the time that he had actually chirped up and came and found us and talked to us, I think WSSC was almost on scene.
Wow. Yeah. Very good point. Good stuff. All right. With that said, did you want me to close this thing, or are you going? Okay. So I've been asked to close this out. So I guess what I'm going to say is thanks for tuning in. I hope that you took something away from this and you found value in it. And I know anyone on this panel is more than happy to further elaborate on anything that was talked about today. Just reach out to them. See you next time.